What's up guys, it's Endymion, and today I managed to get the Platinum Trophy for Kena Bridge of Spirits, an amazing action platformer from indie developer Ember Labs. The music, the story, the gameplay, all of it came together to make Kena one of my favorite games of 2021, but it's not perfect. See, in order to get the Platinum, you need to beat Kena on Master difficulty, which, like it sounds, is tough. And I hit a fever pitch with Kena in particular in its final boss encounter, which I won't be showing or explaining what it is for spoiler reasons obviously. All I'll say is that the final boss fight is both amazing and disappointing in that it relies too heavily on a game mechanic far too many modern video games use these days. And that mechanic is additional enemies in a boss fight, or ads, as the cool kids would say. After punching my couch and swearing at myself, I finally overcame Kena's final boss with about 90% of my health bar intact on Master difficulty. I did it. I almost perfected the encounter, surpassing all the BS to obtain my 107th Platinum Trophy. Then I decided I needed to beat the DLCs for Doom Eternal, which in my opinion, id Software, the developers of Doom, made 2 DLCs with 2 awful final boss encounters for different reasons. So what makes a good boss encounter and what makes a bad boss encounter? That's what I'll theorize and explore in this video. And if you like suffering in video games, want news or lore content, maybe consider subscribing and liking this video so I can annoy you more in the future. I think to begin with, we need to look at boss battles for what they are at their core. A spectacle, a sequence within a game where game mechanics, graphical fidelity, music, and all the best parts of a video game come together to define some of gaming's finest moments. A great example of an exceptional boss fight would be Ishin the Sword Saint from Sekiro. Ishin is a pain in the ass for sure. I would even go as far as to say he's one of the most complex and difficult boss fights developer From Software has ever made. The fight plays across 3 different phases, each phase resulting in new mechanics and challenges that ultimately leads to a heart-pounding crescendo in the finale. What makes Ishin such an amazing fight besides the complex game mechanics or music is that From Software smartly embraces the core fundamentals of what makes a boss fight good. And that's the approach of less is more. See, Ishin doesn't summon any friends to help him out. He's more than enough on his own. But had one of his phases begun with Ishin summoning some Guardian Shinobi or some other kind of ads, it would have lessened the entire experience and made what would be an amazing, memorable fight into yet another boss whose difficulty isn't defined by their actual game mechanics, but just by the fact that there's more than one enemy on screen. Some games, I think, work with ads during boss encounters, but I largely believe that this particular boss battle concept should be reserved for games with heavy multiplayer focuses, and having boss fights where it is almost always guaranteed to be done by at least 3 to 6 people. A good example would be Destiny with its raids or strikes. Of course, there's insane people out there who manage to do some of these raid encounters on their own somehow in the past, but lately it takes the combined intellect, teamwork, and strength of multiple people to overcome these challenges. MMOs in general, I believe, would fit into this category. Destiny, Final Fantasy XIV, World of Warcraft, you know the ones. But when your game is single player focused primarily, as in maybe around 80% or more of players who engage with said content will be more likely than not on their own during it, adding ads to a boss fight just cheapens the experience and artificially ups the difficulty by annoyance rather than complexity or game polish. A game full of these kind of fights is Remnant from the Ashes, a game I really enjoyed despite the swarms of ads and boss fights. That being said, most of the boss fights have ads. It's never really the boss itself that is difficult to fight, but having to deal with the swarms of idiots constantly rushing you. As you can see in this footage here, fighting the Undying King in Remnant, the king isn't hard whatsoever. In fact, I would go as far as to say he's a pushover. But look at all the ads, they just keep coming. and the fight goes from fighting the Undying King to just shooting his buddies constantly so you can have some breathing room. It's the antithesis of what makes a good boss fight, in my opinion. Another example of bad boss design would be the Samur fight from Doom Eternal's first DLC, The Ancient Gods Part 1. Instead of facing down a boss with complex mechanics, you're instead forced to deal with environmental hazards, constant enemy respawns, as well as different demons that each have specific counters to fulfill in order to properly defeat. The problem with this fight isn't necessarily one specific thing, but really all of it. This just doesn't feel like a boss fight. It feels like a cluster you-know-what, with just the developers throwing whatever they can to make the boss fight challenging, and I say that loosely, instead of properly developing an actual boss fight in the first place. If you're spending the majority of a boss fight not looking at the boss but instead killing ads or something, then the boss fight, in my opinion, has lost its direction. It's no longer a boss fight, it's just an annoying swarm and a headache. Another bad example of boss design is also by the same developers of the amazing Ishin fight from Sekiro, and that's From Software, with some of their infamously, hilariously bad boss encounters in Dark Souls 2. Like, there are literally bosses that are just groups of enemies. One boss in particular is literally a room just full of rats. Like, that's it. There's nothing else going on here. One of the rats has a boss health bar, I guess, and the other rats are just rats. You just swing and roll like a madman, hacking away, yet because it has a health bar, it's considered a boss fight when it's just a room full of rats. This wouldn't even be the last time From Software would do something like this with future releases like Bloodborne, a game I love, having some questionable boss fights as well. Like, there's a fight in Bloodborne against these things called the Living Failures, and it's just a room full of big naked dudes that you spank with your weapon. And at first there's one of them, but eventually there's like 3, then there's 4, then it just becomes a mess of you frantically running around like a headless chicken, healing yourself in between the chaos as you spank these naked guys into oblivion. I think if I had to choose between less boss fights in video games but have those boss fights be of a higher quality, I would pick that every time. Because these aren't really boss fights, they're just mosh pits with a health bar, and that's not a boss fight, it's just lazy, no matter really how you look at it. Another good example within a From Software game that uses multiple bosses at once would of course be the infamous and legendary Ornstein and Smo fight, where yes, the fight is against 2 enemies at once, but the challenge lies in that both enemies are distinct and complement one another in order to make one of gaming's best duo fights ever. And the fact that once you kill one of them, the other one goes Super Saiyan and powers up is amazing. It gives the fight this strategic depth and choice of which of the 2 greater evils do you want to deal with ultimately in the end. And it gives reason to replay the game, since depending on which boss dies first, the surviving boss's armor set can be obtained after defeating them. It's a brilliant game design and showcase within the structure of what a boss battle is in a video game. Unfortunately, it's becoming more prevalent and easier for games these days to just toss ads at players and call it a boss battle, and it sucks. I mean, it's impossible that developers aren't aware of this either. Maybe it's a budgeting issue, but they can't honestly be looking at a boss fight with a bunch of ads and go, yeah, this sucks, put it in the game. Or maybe they're just enjoy trolling us. I just think the answer to a good boss fight in video games is to honestly have less of them, but have more polish and actual gameplay mechanics in them instead. Because even if a game has only a few boss battles, if those boss battles are amazingly well crafted, they'll be more worthy and memorable and beloved than having 25 boss battles in your game, but each boss is just a different color or reskin with its entire extended family coming to help it out. I mean, even Mortal Shell's final boss does the ad thing, and I hate it. It's such a shame. The finale of your game is the victory lap, the crescendo, the send-off. Please, if anyone making games is watching this, stop ruining your games with crap like this. Don't end what would otherwise be an incredible experience with a lame entire boss fight full of ads. More Sword Saint Ishin, less rats. That's all I'm saying. Well guys, that's the video on my distaste of ads in boss fights within modern video games. What do you think of modern video game boss fights? What's your least favorite boss fight? Let me know in the comments below. And if you like what you've seen and you want to see more, please like and subscribe to help a new YouTuber out. I'm ENDYMION. All things said about Kenna's less than stellar final boss, please play that game. It is amazing. And let me know of any more variety video game videos you guys want to see in the future. Anyways, thanks for watching guys. I'll see you in the next one.